What we have here right under my desk is a small little seismometer, and that's just a device that registers waves, so any kind of vibrations, it'll register them. But it's extremely sensitive and it can pick up these waves. These are basically physical waves that are generated in the earth by these kind of massive earthquakes. So when you get a 7.4, it was originally thought to be 7.4, then it was upgraded to 7.7. That's a huge amount of energy that's released. And this is because you've got a major plate, the whole Pacific plate is moving and it's kind of moving towards Asia. So these are two massive plates. When they collide, that generates a lot of energy and that builds up stress. And at some point, then it's released and fairly regularly over there, it's released. So they've got a lot of earthquakes there. And that generates a huge, it's basically like lots of nuclear explosions going off. And that sends shock waves around the earth. And this device here can pick them up. And that's what we saw. So when that earthquake happened, within a very short amount of time, those waves had traveled through the earth and got to this. We're almost on the other side of the world here, but still it was able to pick it up and register them.
And obviously this is a significant event, a 7.7 magnitude quake, but presumably you're picking up smaller events every day.
Yes, I mean, if a truck drives past the road just outside here, it'll pick that up. But there are lots of other smaller earthquakes, and it depends basically then how close they are. So if there's one down in Portugal, for example, that's a bit closer, or in Iceland, or in the Mid-Atlantic ridge halfway between here and North America, that's an active area as well. So it depends on how close they are and what size they are. But certainly something like a 7.7 is a significant wave, and it picked that up very, very clearly.
There's obviously a lot of interest in these earthquakes and events of this nature when they take place. What for you is the value of being able to measure and assess an earthquake from the other side of the world?
Well, we're just part of a network. So this is something that's, so there's a thing called Quake Shake. If you go online, you'll be able to see that info at quakeshake.ie. And this is a collaboration between Geological Survey Ireland and the Dublin Institute of Advanced Studies. And the Dublin Institute of Advanced Studies, they're specialists in monitoring earthquakes and stuff like that. So they have a specialist team and they're in a network. They've this network set up in Ireland. They're part of a much bigger network. So in order to figure out what's going on around the world, all these places have to cooperate so we can pinpoint exactly where those earthquakes happen. And also there's a secondary knowledge comes out from that. It tells us about the structure of the earth. So what they do in detail is they use a lot of complex computing, but to use the travel times for these waves as they travel through the earth to be able to tell us what kind of rock they're going through and how deep within the earth. And by looking at lots of that information over a long period of time, we now know what the structure of the earth is like inside. So a lot of it is just based on earthquakes and tracking those waves and seeing how long it takes to get through and doing a lot of complex mathematical analysis of that data to figure out what the inside of the earth is, and then more than how the earth works, because we can see how the different layers are. Then we can understand how plate tectonics works, which is what generates the earthquakes in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Looking at the effects of the earthquake in Japan, we're seeing that the biggest waves so far have measured 80 centimetres, but the meteorological agency in Japan has warned that the earthquake could cause even stronger shaking and we could see much larger waves. Based on what you can see yourself so far, does it appear that the damage will remain fairly contained or could this spread further?
I think based on what I've seen, that's it for now. I don't think it's going to get any worse for now. There's always the risk of aftershocks, which would be another big earthquake after that first one. And that could, if it's at a slightly different angle, whatever, that can generate a different tsunami, whatever, maybe a bigger one. But at this stage, I think looking at the information I have, I think we're past the worst of it. And of course, Japan is very well built, to deal with earthquakes. So they will have experienced on land, they'll have experienced, the movement and the shaking, but their structures are built with earthquakes in mind. So they're very resilient towards that. But even that, only up to a certain degree. If the earthquake was bigger than that, even their systems probably would fail, as we've seen in the past. So they are very significant events. And so one of the reasons why we have this seismometer here is why we don't get big earthquakes ourselves, is to kind of remind people that the planet we live on is very active, very dynamic, and for some parts of the world, it's exceptionally dangerous. So we're lucky here. We should remember how lucky we are in those regards. But we are linked in across the world with all these other, not just the seismometers, but also the geology itself and the earth. So we're all connected.